Hello and welcome to this Quick Start Cybersecurity Bootcamp Career Simulation number 2. I'm Jason Marks. Recently, we had successfully installed a network upgrade for a company client, and they've asked us to come back for another task. The client had recently hired a consultant to install and configure a new server in their internal network to support production and operations. Where do we come in this scenario? We're tasked with determining the vulnerabilities of the new production server and to provide specific examples of how any vulnerabilities could be exploited. We're also asked to do this on the web server in the demilitarized zone. Other things that we'll be doing as well, we'll be exploiting two vulnerabilities in each the web server and the production server, also documenting it by the CVE number and also the level of severity. We'll also be creating a backdoor account on the production server with root permissions once we have accessed all the files, which is also another possibility where someone could get in and get some sensitive data that probably doesn't need to fall into the wrong hands. We'll also be cracking passwords in the users configured from the production server. And finally, we'll be providing recommendations on how to improve their security. So the first thing that we're going to do, and I'm going to work smarter and not harder in this scenario. So to map the vulnerabilities, I'm going to go mmap tac in so it numbers the pages, and then I'm going to put in the web server address 10.0 or 10.200.0.12, and then I'm going to add this script equals vuln command, so that way it will actually document, and I'm going to save this file as web server vuln, so it'll do a scan on the web server vulnerabilities. So while I'm waiting on the mmap scan for the web server and then my database is getting ready to go, I'm going to move over and get the mmap scan for our production server. And as we can see, that's 192.168.0.18. So we'll go back to our Kali trusted machine, and we will do mmap map in 192.168.0.18 script equals vuln, and then we will name this file prod server vuln, and then we'll let that scan through. Now that the web server and the prod server are both done and I have my Metasploit software ready to go, I decided to save it onto the desktop so it has an easy access file to gain access to it. And as we scan through here, this is our first vulnerability. And it has the CVE number that you can get from nist.gov to give you more information on it and also to see the severity of it. And we will recap that after the demonstration. But this one should be able to be done on both the prod server and the web server. As you can see here on the prod server, it's the same version. So this will be the first exploitation that we will do. So we're going to go over here to our Metasploit software, and we're going to begin with search vs ftpd, and it shows right here our backdoor command execution. So use 0, and then we're going to look at our options, and it requires an rhost, so we need to add that in, set rhost, and the first one we'll do is the web server. So now we'll run that. It has found a shell and has now given us a session. Who am I? And the ID. We now have root access to the web server. So to start out, now it's given us access. So we'll browse around here. We'll go into the home directory, see what it lists there. And we'll add a username later on in the production server side of this. But as you can see, it has a username of Jasper, service, and user. So let's actually go in, check Jasper. And it has the social media security policy from the first project. And now it has a candidate list. So me, as the pretending to be the nefarious actor, there's a candidate list in here, and I can actually go in and cat. And this is what it comes up with, is the candidates for Director of Security. You say this file contains sensitive information and is only for use of the CEO. Do not share with anyone. And me, as the nefarious actor, now have access to names, addresses, date of births, and even social security numbers. So if there was a real nefarious actor that was able to get access to this information, they could be able to do some damage. So now we're going to do the same thing and exploit the production server. So what we're going to do is we're going to find our exploit, and then we're going to actually change the rhost to 192.168.0.18. We go in our options and we see that it is now the new rhost, and then we will select run. And now we have a new shell and we are inside the production server. So the next thing that we want to do it kind of like we did last time. We should be in the root file. And now we have access to all of this good stuff. So there is some, let's try etc. Which here is all kinds of things, and we even see that right there. That could come in handy a little bit later. But let's just browse around a little bit more. Pull up the directory list again. And let's try home this time. It's got FTP service and user. Let's look at this user file. Directory with a proprietary directory. Let's see what's in here. Formula, so it's making us go down a rabbit hole here. Oop. Make sure I do it right. So Carolinas, Kansas, and Texas. So let's see here. Let's just cat out Carolinas. And if there was the secret sauce or the secret Krabby Patty sauce, Plankton would probably want to have some access to this. Interesting. So one vulnerable, an RMI code execution vulnerability. I'm going to do a search for Java RMI. As see here, number 4, the exploit multi miscellaneous Java RMI server. It's insecure default configuration, code execution. So you know what? That one looks good. So let's go with that one. So use for, it's defaulted to a payload. Let's look at options. And as you can see, we need to fill in an R host. So we're going to set our R host to the production server. So now when we select options, it is now on the R host. The L host is the 0.20, which is actually my machine, has the listening port. So we're going to do a run. So one last exploit that we can do here is this IRC Unreal backdoor. That looks a little bit suspicious. See? So it shows up an exploit. Use 0. Go to options. Set the R host to 10.200.0.12. Select the options. It's there now. And run. So it didn't run because it hasn't set a default payload. So we need to show the payloads, and we'll just do set payloads. We'll use the first one. We need to do payload instead of payloads. That's my fault. So now we have the payload set, and we can run it. To the home directory where we would have our usernames stored. So what I'm going to do here, add user, and I'm going to, and then I'm going to name it after my puppy, Calvin the Corso. And I'm going to give him a password. He likes pineapple, so I'm just going to do lowercase pineapple. Now, we'll do Calvin Henry for the full name, room number. We'll just put a random. And for phone number, I'm going to do an old wrestling throwback. Actually, 1-900-909-9900. There we go. And then home phone, very Gen X reference, 1-800-COLLECT. Other, don't need it. Yeah, I've already got it in there, so now let's go ls-tac-l. Well, let's not capitalize it first. And Calvin now is in the system, but we still need to give him root access. So user mod tac ag. I'm going to specify root and then put in Calvin Corso. So now I'm going to switch users to Calvin Corso. And then when I go, who am I? It is now Calvin Corso. Now another way to test this would be to pull up the production server, which I will get here. And then let's wake him up. So the production server. So now I'm going to do switch user, or I'm going to log out. Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch user, Calvin Corso, password pineapple, and I'm in. So we have added a new user to the production server. We're going to go back into our desktop and we're going to start up John the Ripper, and then we're going to unshadow first prod server pass, and then prod server shadow, and we're going to create a database file in the desktop called output DB. Now the next step will be command John output.db. And as it looks like now, we have cracked a couple of the passwords in the production server user base with users, with Batman. And there you go. So going through our vulnerability scans, we went to NIST.gov to look at the CVE number and more details, a description of these vulnerabilities. And the first one is a Java remote code execution vulnerability with a score of 9.3, which is very, very high on maliciousness and vulnerability. And it's an integer overflow in Microsoft Internet Explorer 8 and 9, JScript 5.8, and VBScript 5.8 on 64-bit platforms, allows remote attackers to execute arbitrary code by leveraging an incorrect size calculation during object copying, aka JavaScript integer overflow remote code execution vulnerability. Another one in our Java field is the Java RMI, which we exploited during our exercise, which it shows a 9.8 base score, which is very, very critical and could do a lot of damage if nefarious actors do happen to go this route. Which version 10.11 of web methods, one data runs, but the main thing is an authenticated and the Java RMI exploit that we actually use to get into one of the servers. The base score on it is very critical at 9.8, so it could do a lot of damage with nefarious actors. An authenticated attacker with network connectivity to the RMI registry and RMI interface ports can abuse this functionality to instruct the web method's OneData application to load malicious serialized Java object as a parameter to one of the available Java methods presented by the RMI interface. Another very dangerous one is the OpenSSL vulnerability. Now, what this does is versions before does not properly restrict processing of change cipher-spec messages, which allows man-in-the-middle attackers to trigger use of a zero-length master key and open SSL to open SSL communications, and consequently hijack sessions to obtain sensitive information via crafted TLS handshake, aka the CCS injection vulnerability. And as you can see, it has a high score of 7.4. And for the Unreal IRC, which we also use to exploit one of our servers, it has a base score of 7.5, which is a very high score for its vulnerability. But it's distributed on certain mirror sites from November 2009 through June 2010, contains an externally introduced modification of a Trojan horse in the debug dolog system macro, which allows remote attackers to execute arbitrary commands. And finally, we're going to make some recommendations for the client to beef up their security. As you can see, that their production server and web servers are very vulnerable to attack. The first one would be to disable or monitor the FTP, which most likely you want to use an SFTP, which is more secure and can encrypt data. A firewall, you can use firewall to limit inbound traffic to only trusted IP addresses. Authentication ensures strong methods such as multi-factor authentication, which is something like something you know or something you have, like a password of something you know, and a fingerprint, which is what you have. Monitoring the FTP for continuous unauthorized activity, such as login attempts. A reverse proxy load balancer, which would limit the number of open connections from that same IP address, which makes it less vulnerable to attacks. Connection timeouts, which would reduce timeout settings in the web server and production server so idle connections are closed more quickly. Rate limit would be limiting the number of requests from a single IP address. And finally, a web application firewall, which would filter web applications that could contain malicious malware and backdoors. I hope you enjoyed and was very well informed in this quick start cybersecurity bootcamp career simulation number 2. I'm Jason Marks. Until next time.